Good evening, everyone. My name is Rita Hicks, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters Houston Education Fund and the League of Women Voters Texas Education Fund, I'd like to welcome you to this evening's installment of Conversations with the Candidates. As many of you who are in Houston right now know, the traffic is horrendous. So in just a few moments, my regular co-host Darrell Douglas will be joining us, but right now I'll be steering this ship all on my own. I'd like to remind everyone watching at home that for each of the different offices that we are interviewing candidates for tonight, all of the candidates running for each office were invited to participate. The candidates that you see here this evening are the candidates that took us up on our offer. The first interview that we have for tonight is interview for Governor of Texas. We have one candidate with us tonight. Before I introduce her to you, I would like to tell you just a little bit about what the constitutional and statutory duties of our Governor of Texas are. The first, as executive of Texas, responsibility is signing or vetoing bills passed by the legislature. Our governor also serves as the commander-in-chief of our state's military forces. Our governor is responsible for convening special sessions and also declaring special elections to fill vacancies. Our governor is responsible for appointing qualified Texans to state office, delivering a report on the condition of the state to the legislature, accounting for all public monies, and granting reprieves, commutations, and pardons of sentences where appropriate. Tonight, joining us to talk about what she would do as our governor is the Libertarian candidate for Governor of Texas, Miss Kathy Glass. Welcome.
Thank you.
And if you wouldn't mind telling the people at home a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born in Beaufort, Georgia. I was the first person in my family to go to college, worked my way through college and law school. And then on 7/7/77, I came to Texas. I met a good Aggie man, an Odessa native, Tom Glass. We got married. I practiced law in Houston, raised a family, and we were looking forward to retirement. And we had had a long career and done well, and thought, now it's time for us to just kick back and sit at the ranch, watch the cows and the horses, wait for the grandchildren. But it didn't work out that way. In about 2009, I decided the way things were going, I was going to outlive my country. Our country is dying. So I looked around for what I could do to help combat that, defeat that, and I decided I should be Texas governor.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. One of the places that I like to start is talking about your big three. In other words, what are the three most important things that you would like to accomplish if elected governor of Texas?
We have to enforce the Constitution, push back on an out-of-control federal government. I call them bullies or tyrants. They violate the Constitution daily, and no one is stopping them. I would lead the way and unite Texans to nullify these unconstitutional acts. Nullification is not suing the federal government. I say don't sue the buzzards, arrest them, because if they're violating the Constitution, they're violating Texas law, most likely. Another thing I want to do is to defeat cronyism. Our state process is corrupted by cronyism. I call cronies, they're the rich and powerful, the special interests, the people who use government to get things and favors, powers and riches they never could get otherwise. And we have a crony-infested process, and the Republican nominee for governor is part of that, and I think both of them are. Another thing I want to do is I want to fix the border crisis. This is another example where we let Washington dictate to us and make decisions for things that we should be making decisions about. So I would ask our legislature to craft our guest worker program, a made-for-Texas guest worker program, because we have a broken immigration system. Washington's not going to fix it. They don't want it fixed. And at the same time, I would secure the border. As you said, the Texas governor is commander-in-chief of the Texas military. That includes the State Guard, National Guard, Air National Guard. I would use the State Guard under the total control of the governor, can never be nationalized. Even the legislature cannot tell the governor how to use the state guard. I would put the state guard down on the border to enforce Texas law, to assist those local authorities, county sheriffs and others, to enforce the law and stop that crisis on the border. You do both those things, you craft your welcoming immigration policy, and then you work on the remaining problems there this way, we can fix this problem.
Thank you. Let me start at the bottom and work our way up. In terms of immigration, when you talk about a welcoming immigration policy, what does that look like to you?
Well, to me, and this is something I would have to work with the legislature on, I will call a special session if I had to get this fixed. I would say we should have a guest worker program. We've done this in times past. I don't know why we got away from it, but it's what we've put in place of it is not working. And I would say there are just a few rules that we're very firm about. If you want to come into our guest worker program, you have to agree that, well, you have a job, that's fine, and you have to agree you will not accept or seek taxpayer-funded services, that you will get a driver's license. In fact, we could put a DPS office right down there on the border. So you go through this process. You agree you'll get car insurance. You'll abide by all the laws that our citizens do, and then you're free to come and go. And I look at this as a needle in a haystack problem, what's on the border. There are a lot of good people there who are there for some good purposes, but hidden in there and camouflaged by those people are what I call the needles, the bad guys, who are here for no good, here to do us harm. Once you move the haystack and say, come in the easy, open way, you can more easily focus on the needles and you know what to do with them.
Thank you. And then in terms of cronyism, I'm interested to hear how, as governor, how you would combat that, as you say.
Well, one of the powers of the governor is appointments. You know, people say that we're good because Texas is good because we have a legislature that only meets, say, 100 days every other year. Well, that's not really good because it's not that we don't have any government in the meantime, but everything's run by the boards and commissions and things that have been all appointed by our current Republican governor, and they're all cronies. Mm-hmm. So this is a crony-infested, and these people, this group of people, bureaucrats, whatever you want to call them, they're not elected. They're nameless, sometimes faceless. There's nothing that citizens can do to affect their behavior or make them change their minds. So that's something I would do. I would appoint people who are not cronies, people who are knowledgeable about their subject or passionate about it, but they are not do not have anything personal to gain by it. So that's one thing I would do. And another thing I would do to root out cronyism, the line-item veto. We've seen that in the news with Governor Perry's indictment, but not in a good way. I would use the line-item veto for its intended purpose, to get spending under control. It seems that our governor uses it for political payback, and that's the wrong way to use a powerful and a valuable tool like line-item veto. Why can't he do it? Why won't any of the others use the line-item veto this way? Because they're cronies. And every line in that budget, a crony wanted it there and would be very angry if it were gone. Those are just two things I would do to defeat cronyism.
Now, when you were talking about your big three initially, you mentioned cronyism, but you also mentioned special interest. And so I'm curious, in your mind, are those two things different? Do they relate, and are they addressed in the same way?
I think they're the same thing. I call it cronies because that's just a shorthand term for this. But it's people who use the mechanism of government to get things they never could get in the free market or any other way. I'll give an example: water. We have a drought now. We may think we've got a little reprieve because of the recent rainfall, but we're still in a difficult situation. And we're blessed with aquifers in Texas, where we get most of our water that grows our food and puts food on our table, even in the urban areas. But there are people who have made developments, who have created things and built things in places that nature and the free market says don't build there, there's no water. They know that. They're not dumb, but they do it anyway because they know with their connections, they can get water. So we have things like Proposition 6, which passed in the last election in 2012, I think, and then I was opposed to that. The others in this race were for it. I coined the term Nix Prop 6. It created a 3-man board that essentially controls Texas groundwater. And I said, no one should have that power. We don't have a well-defined set of rules who owns and who can control the water underneath your property in the aquifers. We need that because without a set of fair, impartial, and clear rules, well, guess who wins these skirmishes in the boards and the commissions? It's the big guys. They always win.
Now, certainly we hear all the time, particularly with Washington, although I think that it's somewhat applicable at the state level too, that voters feel very disconnected from the electeds that are supposed to be representing them. And, part of that is just a lack of engagement sort of at the grassroots level. So I'm curious as governor, how would you ensure that the job that you're doing is actually what Texans want and are concerned about?
Well, I am going to visit all 254 counties in Texas in my tour bus. I've been to about 238 so far, so we're going to make that. I don't think anybody has done that before, and having done it, I can see why. It's a very daunting task to live on a bus for days or a week at a time. But I think that's the thing you have to do to get out from the major urban areas. For too long, we have elected our statewide office holders with votes from, say, 5 big cities. And that's all the votes that are needed to put you in office. And that's not right, because there are issues like water that it resonates more with rural Texans and people in small and medium-sized cities. So that's why I'm going around to say all Texans matter, and all Texans have to put together. We have to unite to fight these battles. I want to be Texas governor to unite Texans, all Texans, to do 2 things, to fight 2 threats. And that is this out-of-control, tyrannical federal government and the cronyism that's corrupted our state.
Thank you. I want to switch topics on you. We've got a lot of time, so we're going to go through a few different things. One of the major issues over the last year or so has been the rainy day fund. Particularly in light of the way the education funds have been, shrinking in the state. And I'm curious what your thoughts are in terms of, the rainy day fund, whether it should be used for education and whether it should be used sort of as a one-time or on a sustaining basis. What are your views?
I don't know that I would have ever agreed to establishing a rainy day fund, because it is an acknowledgement that you've taxed people too much. But once it's there, I don't know how you return, say, sales tax to the taxpayers. So I would keep it for the rainy day. I would not spend it. Proposition 6, the water fund drained it. We got Proposition 1 coming up in November, which is for the transportation needs. It's going to drain it, and they want education dollars from that. I say no, leave it there, because the day is coming when Washington's not just broken but totally collapsed, taking with it everything we've come to rely on the federal government for, rightly or wrongly, things like 35% of our budget. I'm looking for that day. I have a plan for Texas independence. It's not secession. But this is the way that Texas stands strong and weathers this coming storm. And the rainy day fund will be an important part of how we get through those hard times ahead.
So then I guess a follow-up question for you then would be, as governor, what would that rainy day look like? What would be that sort of triggering point where the rainy day fund would come into play in your mind?
Well, you don't really know, and that's why we should plan ahead. You don't know when, you don't know how. But I see with a $17, $18 trillion debt, there'll come a day when we don't have a functioning currency, when things are just not working, when that 35% of our budget that we get from Washington just doesn't come, or the dollars are worthless. And there are those things, well, we see it all the time, where Washington is not just doing something that we thought it should do, that it said it would do, like immigration and border. It's not doing it. More and more things are like that. They're not doing what we have come to rely on them for. So I say, let's just stand on our own 2 feet and let's start acting like the sovereign state that we are.
Thank you very much. I want to take a moment because my fantastic co-host has made it here, Darrell Douglas. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're in the middle of our candidate conversation with Kathy Glass, who is the Libertarian candidate for governor of Texas. Another thing I would like to to talk about a little bit, because we have been talking about water, which is an integral part of our second largest industry in Texas, and that's agriculture. I'm curious what your thoughts are. As governor, how would you ensure agricultural industry's ability to continue prospering and growing?
Well, we need to have this, what I talked about, a law that defines water rights. Agriculture has to be able to rely on the water in the aquifers, and there's a competition now for what I call the water merchants, the people who want to put in pipelines and pipe that aquifer water to for golf courses in San Marcos, so that they can have swimming pools and green lawns and lush things, but there's no water there. So that's what I want to do, put them on an equal playing field so that they can protect their water in the aquifer that they need. And there's other things too. I talked about the unconstitutional federal acts. EPA is one thing. They're constantly coming up with one scheme after another that plagues our farmers and our oil and gas industry. And it's unconstitutional. And protecting the environment is not a federal function. It's not in Article 1, Section 8. We have a TCEQ here in Texas that if we need to do that, and we do from time to time, that's the agency we should build up for that purpose. But the EPA wants to do things like redefine navigable waters so that a trickle on your farm or your ranch is now controlled by the federal government. We've got to stop that sort of nonsense. So I would lead the way to nullify those unconstitutional federal acts coming from the EPA. The Endangered Species Act is another one. But those are the things that our farmers need to get that off their backs so that they can raise the food that we need.
So, Ms. Glass, you talked a little bit just now about basically the overreach of the EPA. If elected governor, do you feel that TCEQ is handling that function right today? Does it need to be expanded? And what are your views there?
TCEQ is not where it needs to be, not by a long shot. It's full of cronies. I know people whose land has been affected by ridiculous decisions by the TCEQ. I know one that has land in Bulverde, and a developer next door has gotten a permit to discharge treated sewage on his property. And I hear horror stories like this. So TCEQ needs to be reformed so that it does protect the environment, but not at the expense of property rights, and it doesn't use its powers as a weapon to attack to benefit the cronies.
Well, since we're talking about state agencies, I'm also curious about your views on how TxDOT is doing.
TxDOT misplaces $1 billion like I misplace my car keys, except I usually do find my car keys. TxDOT is so rotten to the core, I don't know how we can reform it. I would just shut it down and parcel its powers out to other agencies. It's crony infested. This is cronyism all over again. The toll roads. The toll road cronies use eminent domain to steal people's land so they can build toll roads that no one wants. And some of them are going bankrupt. Why is this happening? Are they just that poor businessmen? No, they know exactly when they build these toll roads. They know that it's not going to be self-sustaining. They know it will go broke, so why do they do it? Once again, they know with their connections, they will make money and leave the rest of us as taxpayers bailing them out.
So you're unhappy with TxDOT, and that, there are people in the state that certainly agree with you about that. But what I'm curious about is certainly Texas is growing, and the infrastructure does have to grow with it. So if TxDOT is not doing it correctly, what's your view of how our infrastructure should grow?
When our current governor first took office, it was pay as you go with our gas taxes. Our gas taxes paid for our roads, repairs, bridges, and that was enough. But the cronies couldn't make money off of that. So they divert monies from the gas tax fund to education and to other things, and they use it to build bike paths and buses and trolleys and trains and other things. The gas tax money should go for roads and bridges, which is part of roads, and that's all it should be. We had no debt when Rick Perry first took office. Now we're drowning in debt, and it's becoming a major part of their TxDOT budget is paying interest on debt. So I would say no more toll roads. We've got enough, and I don't think they're there for the benefit of the people. They're there to benefit the builders. And so that's what I would do. I would say just get that tax money and dedicate it to roads. You know, I've been all over Texas, 230 some odd counties in my tour bus, and I've tested a lot of roads in Texas. And we do have good roads with, I would say, 2 exceptions. Where there's this heavy oil and gas drilling, the roads have been beaten up by those very heavy trucks. So I think you should impose a reasonable user fee on the owners of those companies whose trucks are misusing or abusing or beating up the roads, because they use it far more than those roads were intended. The weight and the traffic is far more than those roads were built for. But in the urban areas, we have congestion. And why do we have congestion? Well, one reason is that the cronies want big, massive projects. And they don't want to do simple things like synchronizing red lights. When I first came to Houston, I lived down South Main, and I could drive downtown. And as long as you stayed just under 30 miles an hour, the lights were synchronized so that you didn't stop at a red light. And then in the evenings, it was the same thing. And I drive the Manor Freeway, 290, right outside of Austin, and I can see how they don't have synchronized lights and how it makes the traffic bunch up. I said, this has got to be intentional. They know that if they synchronize the lights, traffic would flow. So I said, before we start another one of these massive projects, I want to sit down and have common sense discussion about why is the traffic in this mess? Can we do simple things to try to fix it? And then let's see if we need more.
Ms. Glass, just now it took me about 80 minutes to get from 290 and 610 down 610, down 59, all the way into downtown. 610 and a lot of freeways and metropolitan areas, with the population growing so fast here in Texas, are going to have to expand. Also, in some of the rural areas, there's a lot of growth there. If elected governor, what sort of plan would you set forth so that we can have the type of expansion that we need? And where would that money come from?
Well, I'm not sure that we can ever expand the roads enough to keep what happened to you today from happening. Things do happen. But I'm saying let's do the common sense things from the ground up. Who knows? I don't know what caused that traffic jam you were in. But I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere there's a synchronized red light problem that fed into that. I have seen repairs being done at night or sometime when it just made no sense, or in the middle of rush hour. I've seen traffic put down to one lane. And when you get there, there's a couple of guys there doing something that you said, why couldn't they do this after hours or a better time? Why didn't they need to shut down that freeway to do whatever was going on there? So I think there's just not common sense being used.
Thank you. I'm going to shift gears with you again because I'm very curious. We were talking a little bit earlier about a few proposals that were proposed in the last legislative session you weren't particularly thrilled about. One that has had a lot of local impact here in Houston is Prop 4, which was the fund established to try to help several Texas universities achieve Tier 1 research status. I'm curious, as governor, what would be your a view on Prop 4, and then steps taken either to change it or to help those universities actually achieve Tier 1 status?
I'm not convinced that Tier 1 status is worth all the concentration, the focus. It's a reputational thing. We have good colleges in Texas and good universities. Texas Tech is not a Tier 1, but it's a good school. So I think this is a misplaced focus, and it detracts and diverts us from what really is going on in education, skyrocketing tuition rates. Tier 1 has this focus on doctorates and research. And I don't think that's part of the core educational function. So I would say our tax money shouldn't go to fund research or that makes even a school, but certainly a professor's reputation enhanced. That's not what college education is fundamentally about, but that's part of what's driving up our tuition rates.
Governor Perry got a lot of attention by wanting to bring I think it was the $10,000 bachelor's degree to Texas A&M. What are you, and that was one of his ways to sort of address, I guess, the tuition situation that the state is in. Is that something that you favor? And how would you lower tuition rates in the state?
Well, I would look into that. I'm not sure exactly how it works or who's going to monitor it, but it's certainly something that could be a part of a good college experience. But I think fundamentally, our secondary education system has put too much emphasis on college. They made it sound as though college is the only way that you can have a meaningful life, that you can be considered a success in life. And if you don't go and graduate, then you're just some kind of failure. And I disagree with that. I think vocational schools should be much more emphasized, and we should just make it an option. Some people want to go to college, and that's fine, and some people don't. But supply and demand. The more people that want to go, the more people that do buy any product, the more the product costs. So I would say just ease up and let people find their own way. If they want to go to college, that's fine. If they want to do something else with their life, that's fine too.
So certainly there has been a lot of talk here in Houston about the growing need for vocational trained workers, especially in oil and gas. So as governor of Texas, do you think that's something that the state should be focused on encouraging?
Well, it used to be part of our high school experience, and I don't know why we got away from it. So I think it was something we should return to. Give people more options, so that, because I just reject the notion that everybody has to go to college or you're some kind of second-class citizen. I don't agree with that.
Thank you. So then I want to sort of back up the educational scale then, because we're sort of talking about end product, but another major issue for the state is what to do about early education, particularly pre-K and K through 6, is at least according to a lot of the research, is like formative years, but also very hard, especially for low-income families in the state to be able to afford. So what are your thoughts on how Texas should handle early education and trying to make sure that all of the Texans growing up in our public education system are cared for?
Well, I'm going to say something you're not going to hear from any other candidate. We spend too much on education. You can spend too much on anything, and we do. We accept an inferior product. We spend too much on education. And expanding it, I think that our education system is all but destroyed. And it needs to have an overhaul, a fundamental overhaul. And I would not include increasing the amount of time that our government schools have control over our children. Education under our Texas Constitution, the reason we fund our public schools is because we want our citizens to understand liberty and be able to defend their liberties and their civil rights. That's in the Constitution. But we are not teaching our children to love liberty. We are indoctrinating them to accept conformity and collectivism. And that's not education, and that's not good citizenship. So I want a total fundamental overhaul of how we spend our Texas tax dollars in education.
If we could, I guess, tap a little further into that. You said you think we spend way too much money on public education. Or were there any actual experiences or any particular things that you've seen happening in schools, elementary, middle school, that an example of like ways that you think we could?
Well, we spend our educational dollars, but it's not on education. The Taj Mahal-like administration buildings, I call them the Taj Mahal stadiums, the athletic stadiums that a small college would envy, marble floors, incessant testing that is very destructive and contrary to the education experience and very costly. Yes, there's lots of things that we do that we shouldn't do, and it's not just that we waste it, it's that it's counterproductive. It destroys education.
So just sort of jumping off what Jarrell is talking about, when you say fundamental overhaul, in your mind, what does that look like?
To me, it looks like we repeal property taxes, the school property tax. Then at the state level, we still continue to send tax monies from the state of Texas. That's from our permanent school fund and a mishmash of other things that go into that pot. Currently, that's about $9,000 per student. I think that's enough. A lot of parents would love to have $9,000 for tuition to educate their child. But I would make it so remove barriers. If that location, if that local school district and the voters there want to supplement that $9,000, then they should be able to enact, say, a penny sales tax to enhance that if they want to. That's why I say, and I believe in the spendthrift theory, that when you give someone too much money to spend, they don't spend it wisely. We see this when people win the lottery or an athlete gets a big paycheck. They end up in debt because they have too much money. They don't make good choices. They don't think they have to. I think when you know you have a limited amount and you're supposed to spend it, be the good stewards of that, you spend it more wisely.
In 2011, the legislature cut like $5 billion from public education. A lot of people, legislators that were against that cut wanted to take money from the rainy day fund.
Mm-hmm.
If there was a Governor Glass in 2011, how would you have handled that situation?
We wouldn't have taken it from the rainy day fund. And I don't know that I would say how exactly what those dollars should have been, but I do say we spend too much on education, and we did in 2011. I would not have done it piecemeal or just work on the dollar side of things. I would work on what I call the overhaul. Let's figure out what we want the dollars spent for. We recently had a court decision that ruled that the school property tax was unconstitutional. Well, I said, hooray, if it's unconstitutional, why are we collecting it? But they'll continue to do that, I dare say. But they also said that it was unconstitutional what was spent. It was too low. And this is the interesting thing. Why did that judge say that it was too low? What was his evidence? Because the test scores are so bad. Well, isn't that shocking that you reward failure with more money? That wouldn't happen in the free market or in business anywhere else. The worse you do, the more money you get to spend. That's perverse incentives right there. And what's a school district supposed to do? If they know, if they just want more money, all they have to do is have poor test scores, and they get it.
So we've been talking about education in terms of spending, but it sounded to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounded to me when you were talking about sort of having localities come in on top of state dollars that you're talking about localizing education. Is that the idea that you have, that the local school districts would have more power in how they educate their kids?
Yes, and I want to get it down as low a level as possible, as close to the individual, the parents, as I can possibly get. And I think local control has been a mainstay of not just Texas education, but education all over the country. And when we did have true local control, our public schools worked a lot better. And I think that's how we've got to focus and try to return to that, so that nobody likes the testing that's going on. Teachers their profession has been all but destroyed. People are getting out of teaching the tests are not the only thing, but it's a huge indication of what's gone wrong and why we're focusing on the wrong things. I think that Texas teachers will lead the way in how we finally get a handle on what educational reform has got to look like.
If we could continue along that same path, you talked a little bit before about federal overreach and the need for liberty, and also the need to cut back on education spending. Not too long ago, North Forest Independent School District, it's a school district on the north side of Houston, was actually ordered by TEA, the Texas Education Agency, that was shut down, and HISD, the Houston Independent School District, basically took those schools. And the reason why they did was because of, the very low performance of those schools and them basically having their own local control. So in your opinion, would you have supported in that instance TEA, enforcing that? Or if it were up to you, do you think the school district should have been able to, continue the way that they saw fit?
I try not to voice opinions on things that I really don't know the facts of firsthand. I don't have a good opinion of TEA. But I do recognize that when Texas, pursuant to our Constitution, pays this amount of money, tax money, there does need to be some accountability. Now, who should do that? And who should say, well, we want you to, we don't want you to do all these tests, but there is some test that we should have about, are you using our tax dollars appropriately? And so I don't know who's the person to do that, but I suspect I want TEA to do that.
And since since we're sort of talking about metrics, obviously you don't think that standardized testing is a good metric for student performance. So, what, in your view, would be that metric for determining are our kids learning what they're supposed to be learning in school?
It can be a standardized test. We took the Iowa Basic Skills Test every year when I was in school. So there are tests like that that have been known to be a good reflection of where you are. And so I'm not against all testing, but what's being done now, the C-scope that's in our schools, which is another name for Common Core, the way it is in other states, it's a bad situation. It tests for the wrong things, and what's tested is what is taught. So that's a problem. We've got to eradicate C-scope from our schools and all types of federal influence. That's a very surreptitious way the federal government has insinuated itself into our Texas schools and process.
You spoke a little bit before about really, more local control in the school districts. I'm curious to know, as a gubernatorial candidate, if a school was low performing, what are some of the, and I know you wouldn't be on the, it's more of a school board question, but as the governor, that oversees the agencies such as TEA, what would some ways, that you think schools could improve if it weren't, more funding or things along that line?
Well, I would say a lot more emphasis on vocational training and education, and I would say I'm opposed to truancy laws. If a truancy law is an admission that you've got a product that's so bad you can't give it away. If someone of a certain age decides that he's better off doing something else, and I would say let him go, because he's not going to be there learning. He's not benefiting from his experience. He's probably disrupting the class and making that teacher's job much harder. So I'd say let him go. People make different decisions and they flower at different times in their life. Maybe he needs or she needs to get out and see what the real world is like and then come back of his own volition.
Thank you. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit to another, it is a statewide issue, but certainly a local services issue too, and that's healthcare. Because there are, as I understand it, about 1 million U.S. citizens living in Texas below the poverty line who don't qualify under for affordable coverage through Medicaid. So, and obviously this has been a hot button issue in Texas over the last couple of years as we've seen the Affordable Care Act enacted. What are your views on how the state should tackle health care?
I would opt out of Medicaid. It's not Medicare, of course, Medicaid. It's bankrupting us. We can't afford it. It is over 25% of our budget. I would take those savings, though, and tell the legislature we need to craft our own program, what's right for us and our citizens. But we don't need to be dictated to by Washington about what our services should be. I'm convinced that that way we'd have better services at a lower cost, and we would be in control of our own destiny.
Are there any, I guess looking over the past, what is it now, 14 years that Governor Perry has been governor before he decided not to run again, are there any decisions that come to mind that he made that you would have handled differently?
Well, I would have secured the border using our Texas State Guard. In 2010, I wrote Governor Perry a letter urging him to stop begging the federal government to secure the border and act as Commander-in-Chief of the Texas military, use the State Guard, to go down to the border and assist local law enforcement to enforce Texas law. Now he's done something that may sound similar to what I was urging the National Guard, but it's really not. I call it Operation Photo Op. The 1,000 guardsmen, I think 300 are there now, But their rules of engagement, according to the Adjutant General's testimony to the legislature, the rules of engagement are don't engage. And they're not there for any purpose but to observe and to help help the entrance. So I wouldn't do that. We talked before about my proposal for a welcoming guest worker program, and I feel very strongly that if you do that, and then you secure the border, we could solve the crisis. Not totally solve. You never totally solve any crisis or any problem. No law fixes every ill, but I think we could go a long way. But that's just one thing that I Gardasil. I mean, there's lots of things. The line-item veto. He's used his powers as governor not for their intended purpose. He didn't use the line-item veto to get the budget in shape to cut spending. He used it as political payback for his enemies, and that's wrong.
Well, as you know, Darrell has alluded to, we've had the same governor in Texas for quite a long time now. So I'm curious what your view is on term limits for our Texas governor.
I think it's a good idea, and I would stop it too.
And what about for the? I mean, would that just be for the governor? Would it be for the legislatures?
I think term limits is an idea that is needed. We just don't. The cronyism has created these blocks of people who just get in there, and because they have the funding of the special interests, they're untouchable. So something like that to keep it mixed up. I mean, I know it's not a surefire cure for cronyism, but it would keep them on their toes.
And I guess to tap off of that, what do you think would be a realistic, or if there was if November happens and you're Governor
this
Glass?
would have to be a constitutional amendment.
Okay.
And I don't know that you're going to get that, because guess who gets to decide what's on the ballot? The legislature. So yes, I can agree in principle that would be a good idea, but I just don't see it happening because they'd be harming themselves.
Well, and this is so related. We were speaking earlier about your views on how state positions should be filled, but I'm curious about your view on the size of the state government. Is it too big? Is it the right size? How would you change it if you would change it?
I think it's too big, but I don't know how to get it down any more, because we've got 254 counties in Texas. We only have 31 senatorial districts, and that covers a lot of ground. You look at the map of West Texas, it's almost one senatorial district. So I think for people to have representation, then I don't think we can cut it down anymore. I would rather cut down the number of boards and commissions and things like the unelected positions, and make the elected people start doing more work.
Well, then let's talk about the unelected positions then. If you were going to narrow, where would you narrow?
Well, let's see. I think in my administration I could do without the office of the First Lady. And I'm sure that's a small thing, relatively speaking, but it's an indication. Everybody doesn't have to have an office that's paid for by tax dollars.
You spoke a little bit before about the size of the government and cronyism and term limits, and I was just talking about this the other day, the two-party system and the whole redistricting process, how in some cases it made it safe for either party to hold on a lot of times to their districts. If there was a governor, how would Governor Glass handle redistricting?
I would do it almost by a computer. To say, okay, we want our districts to be compact and contiguous. We don't want these funky shapes.
Wrap around.
Yes, things like that. Try to keep it within a county or a reasonable or known landmark, counting line, something like that. And I would do it that way, and we'll see what happens. Because you're right, there are lots of races that are just unopposed on the ballot. The Libertarians have more candidates in some races than, say, the Democrats do, because it's known. It's like a quid pro quo. You get this one, you get this one. You get this one. No, that one's not ours, that one's not yours. Like they own these seats. And that's part of why so the two-party system is corrupt. They have this agreement that they are going to work together and keep each other. They spar over things. They do have differences. But on the fundamentals of keeping themselves in office, I think they've got more in common than difference.
Well, certainly because we have these sort of two longtime institutional parties, it makes the third-party candidates' race have to look very different. So what are some of the things you have been doing as a candidate that are different than, say, your opponents?
Well, my 254 tour, I'm going out, and these are counties that have never seen a gubernatorial candidate before. Never seen a libertarian before. Certainly never seen them both in one person. But that's what I'm doing to try to say we've got to unite. We've got problems. You know, when I came to Texas, which was on 7/7 of 77,
Whoa.
it was a one-party state, Democrat, and it was corrupt. And the people didn't like that. Enough people that they wanted something different. And what I've read about, it was you work within the Democrat Party in the primary. Everything got decided there. And if you didn't do that, then your business suffered and your family relationships suffered. Because you know, think about, to be a Republican at that time was the party of Reconstruction. And throughout the South, that's not a good thing. But there were enough people didn't like that, the corruption and the lack of competition that went with that they worked and rehabilitated the Republican Party into it, made it a different brand. And I think for a while there we did have a functioning two-party system. But you know, the cronies didn't get where they are by being stupid, so they recognized, okay, the action used to be over here, so they went over to actions over here now. And now they own the Republican Party. I don't know what you do, really. Maybe the lesson we can learn is every 20 or 30, 40 years, you have to start a new party, one that the cronies don't control. And if that's it, then I think we can do that.
So I'm curious then, what made you decide I'm a libertarian?
Well, I think I was born that way.
I was born that way.
Yeah. I just learned there's a name for it. So I was reading, it's 1978, I was reading an article, I can't remember if it's Newsweek or Time, but it talked about the Libertarian Party, and just the way they described it, I said, that's me, that's me. So I called up and got active, and I ran for Attorney General in 1982, and then I took a break from almost all politics while I was raising our family and practicing law. And I didn't have time for this politics stuff, but I got back in it in 2010. But I'm just a natural-born libertarian, and I think most Texans are, to tell you the truth. When I was first involved in the Libertarian Party back in the 70s and 80s, I wouldn't have said that. We had a hard time talking to Texans about taxes and things like that. But a lot of work's been done, and I think now I go around and I think Texans are libertarian. Not totally down the line, but on the big issues and on most things. They're very live and let live. They're very much get out of my way, get out of my business, and I'll do the same for you. So that's what I'm saying. We're a natural fit for the Texas voters. But I think two things have to do before we really start to do well. One is one of the two major parties has to basically implode, and I think they're working on that. But we as a party have to do better too. When I say, I talk about we've got to chart a new course, that we can't keep doing the same things we've always been doing. You hear people say if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. Those people are optimists. We're in just a world of hurt now. If we keep doing what we've always done, we will not keep what we've got, our liberty, our prosperity. So we've got to chart a new course, and I hold my own party to that too. We have to do better. We have to step up.
The U.S. is on the cusp of a conversation around marriage equality. What are your views on marriage equality?
I would get government out of marriage.
Okay.
And the one way you could do that is we don't issue, what that means basically don't issue marriage licenses.
At all?
At all, at all. That's handled, your church, or you can do it. But I would say we should allow people to register their relationship. Every county in Texas has a county clerk, and every county clerk has a registry for property records, deeds, liens, things like that. There's no reason why we couldn't have a registry of, I don't know what you want to call it, domestic partnerships. that anybody could register to announce to the world this is their agreement. And it could have a certain set of default assumptions about what that agreement meant as far as hospital visitation and inheritance and things like that, or you could write your own agreement if you were so inclined. But the benefit of this is it is announced to the world, and the government doesn't decide which definition of marriage gets to prevail and which one is rejected. And it's there 24 hours. So if something comes up in the middle of the night, you have a hospital problem, hospital wants to know who can make decisions for this person. They can go to the registry.
The registry. Okay. And I'm curious to know, I mean, so far, a lot of your views are really, are really interesting. What's it like on that 254 tour bus?
Well, we did have someone ride with us from Newsfix
Okay.
on the bus.
Today?
No, it was about a month ago.
Okay.
I just rode to see what it was, and that was aired, a very nice segment. And, it is when you eat, sleep, get dressed, put on your makeup while the bus is rolling, you have to have a certain amount of balance and flexibility. I think those are good traits in a governor. But it also helps if your husband is your campaign manager.
Wow.
I don't know that it would work any other way.
Okay. That's very interesting. Have there been any places in Texas that really stand out to you where you said, oh, I really loved this place?
Oh, yes. In fact, we're talking with Texas Country Roads to see if they want to do a segment. We've got pictures from all over. There are places in Texas. Even my husband, who's a native Texan, had no idea we had these things in Texas. We went to, I'll give you three, just you got to see. Glen Rose. These are the top of the hill country. Beautiful vistas. I mean, just jaw-dropping, beautiful. I never heard about it. Then there's this place in Edwards County. I can't remember the name of the mountains, but it's where Lost Maples. Beautiful. I mean, rugged terrain. You don't know. And you look around and say, Texas is supposed to be flat and brown and arid? I said, I think that's just a myth that we tell to keep the Yankees away or something, because it's beautiful. And then we were just out in the Panhandle a week ago, and I thought you were in Utah's Moab Desert, where they do all the John Wayne pictures. Beautiful, just red hills and mesas, and I thought, this is Texas? So there's so much more in Texas than what we see about and hear about. And I'm so glad that I had the privilege to do this. It's a thrill of a lifetime, and I may write a book about it.
Well, so with all of the different terrain you're describing, you have equally as many different kinds of Texans in a state as large as ours, with such diverse economies from one end of the state to the other. I imagine that presents a huge challenge as governor, trying to represent a constituency that is that diverse.
We are diverse in some ways, but Texans have certain traits that are common. And I will tell you, they're sick of the two-party system. They're sick of the federal overreach, the bullies. They're sick of the spying, the NSA spying, the unconstitutional spying on. It's un-American. They're sick of debt. Texas has the second highest per capita debt in the nation. So those are things that I think we have got in common. Almost all Texans feel that way. And so I try to focus on what we have that unites us, because what good does it do to focus on what divides us? I try to solve problems, like the gay marriage thing. I don't want one side to win and say, I made you accept my definition. I want it so people can just live their lives and get on with it.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we're getting near the end of our hour. I want to give you the opportunity, if you'd like, if you have any closing remarks to make to the people at home, please feel free.
Well, I think I'm the only one in this race that has the vision of the hard times that are coming and the plan for how to defeat it and the guts to see it through. And I think Texans want to unite. They want to fight back against our problems. but they want to have a good chance, a plan, just some reasonable approach. I want to have a leader to lead them. I think I'm that person, and I don't see anyone else in this race. I know some people think that one of the other candidates would be a disaster, but I'm here to say, I hope it doesn't sound conceited, that if I don't win, I don't think it matters which one of the other two does, because we're facing hard times with no leader, no vision, no plan, and no guts. And in a three-way race, I don't need a majority. I need a plurality. 34% can take this thing. So just 1/3 of Texas voters want what I want what I offer, then I can be governor without a runoff. So I'm asking everyone to check me out at my website, kathyglass.org, Kathie, kathyglass.org, or check me out on Facebook, Kathy Glass for Texas Governor. But we need to, don't need to stay the course with a corrupt two-party system. No, don't stay the course with a failed two-party system. Chart a new course with me and the Texas Libertarian Party.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Of course. You have just heard from Kathy Glass, Libertarian candidate for Governor of Texas. We have 3 more offices to cover in our candidate conversations tonight, so please stay tuned for the next candidate. Welcome back to Conversations with the Candidate. The next office that we're going to be talking about is County School Trustee for Harris County. And to tell us a little bit about the position that we're going to be discussing, I'm going to give Darrell the opportunity to tell the people at home what are we going to be talking about.
Okay, so the Harris County Department of Education supports the educational needs of 25 school districts in Harris County. Services are extended to children, adult learners, educators, local governments, charter schools, and taxpayers. Some of those services include instructional services for students, professional development for educators, grant services, and other services like records management.
Thank you, Darrell. We have one candidate with us tonight for County School Trustee. Just as a reminder, every candidate running for office was invited to attend, and the ones that we have here tonight are the ones who took us up on that offer. And with us tonight, we have Deborah Kerner, who is a Democrat running for position 5. Good evening.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for joining us. If you wouldn't mind, please take a few minutes to tell our viewers at home a little bit about you.
I will, and Darrell did such a great job of telling the department. You've taken some of what I was going to say, but I can certainly talk about myself. I am Debbie Kerner. I am the incumbent county school trustee. My particular position is a county-wide position. I am an educator. I've been an educator all of my life, a speech-language pathologist. I have a bachelor's degree in speech-language pathology from Syracuse University, and I have a master's degree from Columbia University in speech pathology, and it was actually from Teachers College. So I started out with that strong education background. I've worked in a variety of settings, including hospitals, and I've been taught at University of Houston, and I've been in private practice since 1980. In my private practice, I have worked with children who've been in Head Start. I've worked in private and public preschools, private and public schools, K through 12, and in schools for children with special needs, such as autism. I've also worked with people who have aged out of the public school program, which for children with special needs goes until you turn 22. So I've also worked with young adults who've aged out. So I've actually worked with many of the kinds of people who the department serves. So it gives me a unique ability to understand the kinds of programs that we provide, and I can also explain it to some of the fellow board members when they ask about the ARD committee, for instance, that our children in our ABC schools have to go through, or our therapist services, or therapy services. So it gives me that ability to understand, and I can help the other board members as well. So I don't know.
So does HCDE compete with other school districts that fall within Harris County for enrollment? And what does your enrollment look like?
Okay, we do not compete with the other school districts in Harris County. We support the 25 school districts in Harris County. We provide them with programs that would either they couldn't provide themselves or that would be very costly for them to provide, such as our special schools. Our ABC schools serve children with severe disabilities, and I have gone down there many times and seen children with severe disabilities, and they might be served in a classroom with 4 children and 2 teachers. So it makes it very, very expensive to have that kind of a staffing load, but yet by serving the districts, we can do that. We can have that, whatever the children need. If they need a one-to-one aid, that's what we can provide. And so we help the districts and cut down their costs because of having those facilities. We do not have our own students. The school districts keep the students on their enrollment. So we would look like we have no students at those schools. So that if HISD sends a student or Goose Creek sends a student, those students stay on the district rolls. They keep the money from the state for that. And actually the special education dollars that they get from the federal government. and then they just pay for our services.
So we're talking around enrollment, but I'm curious about funding because is it a situation where Harris County Department of Education competes with Harris County for state funding and other sources of funding, or do they coexist?
Well, Harris County doesn't provide educational services, so we provide the funding. And actually, the people that we're competing with, like on our federal grants, if we didn't get it, somebody could get it out of state. So we're bringing money back into Texas and back into Harris County that otherwise might go someplace else. Our funding is only 20% based on taxes. Our tax rate is the lowest in the county. You only pay a little bit over half a penny per $100 for our services. So the average taxpayer in Harris County might pay $12 a year. In fact, we lowered our tax rate this time because we took the effective tax rate because, as we all know, property values increased. We lowered our tax rate to keep the dollars that are going out the same. So, no, we're not competing.
Well, I appreciate your explaining that, because I do think that that is a point of confusion for the average Houstonian, is the difference between the Department of Education and the various school districts. So thank you for that explanation.
Right. As we know, the school districts charge a lot more on their tax rate than we do. We get that very small rate, and for every dollar that we get in taxes, we turn it into $5 worth of services, because the majority of our money comes from state and federal grants, fees for service. We get some corporate funding, donations, things like that. So we're an extremely efficient organization and playing a very vital role in Harris County.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Kerner, you're an at-large board member. If there was one issue that you would say sort of sums up your service, your one issue, what would that be on the board?
Oh, it's so difficult because there's so much that we provide and so much that I feel that I can provide. My one issue.
The last thing that kept you awake at night.
Well, we're in the middle of a superintendent search, so that kept me up. In fact, last Thursday, our superintendent retired in June, and we've been in the middle of a superintendent search. We had wonderful, wonderful candidates. We narrowed that down to 6 individuals. We interviewed them, and then last Thursday, a week ago today, we did our second series of interviews for the top 3. And now they're in the final negotiation stage, and at our board meeting in March, which is in our board meeting in October, which is in about a week, we'll be announcing our candidate of choice, and then 21 days after that, on November 12th, that candidate would be eligible to start. I'm not going to say he's going to start at that point, but certainly by the January 1. So that's been what's been keeping me up most recently.
I'm curious to hear what made you decide to run for the position in the first place, and then also what made you decide to run for re-election?
Okay. As I said, I'm an educator, and I've been in special education as a speech-language pathologist. I've been working with many of the students, the kinds of students who need our services. I wanted to give back to the community, and I looked around and thought, how can I best do that? And I thought about running for office so that I could be one of those decision makers to help to make the services better. And I thought that with my interest in running for office and being able to help improve the situations, and my background as a speech-language pathologist, I thought it was a good meld. And I think I've been able to provide excellent service the past almost 6 years, and I intend to again create and provide excellent service for the next 6 years. Should the voters of Harris County do what I'm really hoping they'll do and re-elect me on November 4th.
we spoke a lot earlier about HCDE working to complement, or I guess the school districts. What are some ways that you think that relationship could be stronger, or we could stretch that dollar even more?
Okay, one of the things that we do is we have meetings with the superintendents. We have meetings with the school board presidents to find out what their needs are. Every year, and I mean they're talking throughout the year, but every year they go through a needs survey to find out what the districts need and want, and then we try to meet that need. I'll talk about a program that I had been wanting to bring to fruition. And that was a program for vocational training for students with disabilities. It was one that our districts really wanted. We were working on the program. We had a building, we had an advisory board, we were gearing up for staffing, and then we had those very severe budget cuts in 2011. I still remember I was at a meeting on that program when I found out about the budget cuts, and I felt like I'd been socked in the stomach. It was just so devastating. At the time, it was $5 billion coming from education, and we had to drop that program. And the districts are still in need of that program, and they're kind of floundering around about what to do. But that's an example of how we talk with them, we find out what their needs are, and then we try to meet that need. I'm still hopeful of getting that program.
Well, so one need that we hear about quite a lot, and especially in the last couple of years, is early childhood education,
Yes.
pre-K. And there was even the Early to Rise initiative, unfortunately didn't make the ballot. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on whether something like Early to Rise should be on the ballot, or whether there's a state legislative solution to the early childhood education issue. What are your thoughts?
Okay. I'm a big proponent of early childhood education. In fact, my very first job, back when I started a long time ago, was as a preschool teacher and speech-language pathologist for deaf and hearing impaired children. So I started out in preschool education. I'm really supportive of that for all children, and promoted it in the Texas Association of School Boards in their legislative agenda. I want the children to get the services. I'm not going to say it has to be a countywide initiative, it has to be a legislative initiative. I want to see all of the different options, and I want to get the job done. So I hope that answers your question. I just would like it to come from whatever sources it can, and if it's from multiple sources, even better.
Well, it raises an interesting follow-up question because I have a number of educators in my family, and one thing that I hear from them often is that just the average teachers in our schools, they know what their students need, but they don't feel like when they convey that information that it's really heard by decision makers, particularly in Austin, making decisions about our schools. So then my question is, do you think there should be a stronger education lobby by the teachers, not paid professionals, but the teachers actually working with students in Austin?
I think it is all of our obligation to let our legislators and the governor know what we want, and the lieutenant governor in this state know what we want. And I think that the teachers need to be contacting the decision makers. I told you, I used to be on that side calling the people all the time. And I decided to cross the barrier and run for office because I wanted to be a decision maker. And I wanted to be able to go as being an elected official and to call and say, I think this is what should happen for education. We can't sit back and let somebody else do it. We can't sit back and think, oh, a paid lobbyist will do it. We have to be the ones to do it. We have to be the ones to pick up the phone, call those legislative offices, send those emails, go to Austin, do whatever we can. And if you talk to them, and right now is a great time to do it, they're running for re-election, now is the time to do it. I was the vice president for for government and government policy for the Texas Speech Language Hearing Association. And that was my job, to get our members, more than half of whom are in the public schools, to go and to do just that, to contact their legislators and tell them what their concerns are, and to encourage them to vote in certain ways. And another thing that they can do that might make a difference is to invite their legislators and the candidates into their schools, into their places where they work, so the legislator or their staff can see firsthand what's going on. And so they can say, this is what has to happen. And I think that that can make a difference. So I hope so.
You have a very interesting background, being that you were an educator. I guess
I still am.
my old boss, Alma Allen, say once an educator, always an educator. So educator, and now you're actually on the board, doing some organizing work, with the teachers' unions. One thing that I would always run into was this sort of intimidation factor that comes in from the teachers when it came down to the people that hold your position, because, who are they to then, come and speak against you? Being that you've sat in both chairs, how will we get over that?
Well, all I can say is we all put our pants on one leg at a time. We're all the same. Very, very approachable. I find people are very approachable. You want to hear from people. I just spent neighborhood night out. I went to 6 different neighborhoods and talked with as many people as I could. Talk to them about their concerns. They could talk to me about, whatever they wanted. I had people asking me about the textbooks. And I said, I can't help you with the textbooks, but this is what you can do about it. Mm-hmm. So I told them what to do, who to contact, and now is the comment time for that. So encouraging people to go and not to be afraid to do it. We're all the same. People will talk to me, and then when I mention that I'm an elected official, they'll say, you are? They don't realize that. Here they've been talking to me one-on-one and realize they don't have to be intimidated. So we're all the same, be it another trustee or be it the governor. We're all the same. You want to talk to people, tell them what you think.
So I would shift gears just a little bit, because I've been hearing on my radio lately a lot of talk about virtual schools in Texas. Mm-hmm. And I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the role that virtual schools should be playing in our school districts.
I think that they can be advantageous. We have a virtual schools network as one of the services that we provide for Harris County Department of Education. You have students in some of your smaller school districts, and we provide that statewide. So when you go out to some of these districts where there might be 100 students or a couple hundred students, they're not going to get the kind of education that will let them go forward and get advanced placement courses or dual college courses. So when they go to college, they're going to have to pay the full bill, which is very expensive, and they're going to be behind their fellow students in college. So by doing some of those virtual classes, they can get the kind of education that they would get in a big city. You also have kids who are ill, who can't get out, who can't get to school. Or maybe they just broke their leg. I have one student who broke her leg and her school is upstairs, downstairs. She can't go until her leg is fixed and she can climb stairs again because there isn't an elevator for her. She can go on and do the virtual classes. Also, they can be very interesting. Students have a wide variety of different ways that they learn. And you can have it where they can learn in a way that's better for them. It's not always back when my father went to school. I looked at one of his textbooks, and my father would have been over 100 years old now. And it was black and white, more repetition, very dull and boring. I think the book was about that thick, completely different than what they do now. Another thing that the virtual schools can do is they can keep things up to date. It's not like a printed textbook that can sit there for 10 years. Think about how everything has changed in social studies in the past 10 years. So they certainly have their place.
If we can talk a little bit about adult education, I'm really interested in knowing not only for those that have aged out, but also for are there ways that adults can actually take advantage of HCDE that haven't aged out?
Yes. Well, we have a big adult education program, and there's different aspects to it. We provide it in places all over the county. One of the programs that we have is for students to get their GED, okay? So they can go in, get their classes, pass their tests, and then it puts them another step ahead in the job market because they have that GED diploma.
And is that free of charge for the person?
And
I don't want to put you on
should
the
know
spot, I'm
this. I should know it. I can't tell you for a fact.
Okay.
I'm not going to say something I don't know for a fact. If there is a charge, I'm sure it's not very much. But we've graduated several hundred students a year who have gotten their GEDs. We also have programs for people who don't speak English, and they can learn English as a second language. And so then that also makes them more marketable because then they can come in and get jobs where English is needed instead of all of the different languages that are taught here in Harris County. Both of those are things that can put them a step up. So a very vital service, one of the ones that I like to tout for HCDE. Thank you for asking.
Okay.
Right. Well, and then going along with the adult education question, you were mentioning earlier that HCDE has a number of different sources, and some of them are private sources. And what it made me wonder is, for programs like the vocational training for special needs adults that you were working really hard to have passed and then budget issues got in the way, is that a place where HCDE could do some kind of public-private partnership with something like the Heart Foundation to be able to offer those things without having to find a place in your budget? I guess that's one very specific example, but the broader question is, are there circumstances in which HCDE does public-private partnerships, and what are your thoughts on those?
Well, I think it would be one that maybe we should pursue because we had to stop it because we were looking at the source of revenue being for the school districts, where they use the ABC schools for those students, and then for other students who would be the potential for job training for employment, that would have been provided by the school districts, where they would have sent the students in before they had aged out. But maybe we can look at some public-private partnerships. You had asked about public-private partnerships. One of the areas where we have a big public-private partnership is with our Education Foundation. That is a separate 501c3 that works to raise funds for the department. And they will get money from Shell, for instance, or NASA, or other agencies or governments or companies, actually, that will bring money in for the department. And a lot of the programs that they're providing is they're working on something called EcoBot Challenge, which goes on all over the county and brings in a lot of students who get together in teams and create robots out of Legos that have some very specific tasks that they have to do. And then it's creating future engineers. I mean, it's a very good source for learning for a wide variety of students. But that is an example of how we have a public-private with many private companies.
And that's hard to say, but thank you very much for that.
So if November goes well and you're re-elected, what are you looking forward to this term?
Well, I'm excited about our new superintendent, and I'm looking forward to more outreach into the community. I want to go out and talk more about what kinds of things we do. I'd like to go and see that vocational training program come through. I'd like to see some more things for preschoolers, training of the preschool teachers and the parents. And I should have mentioned one of the preschool things that we're doing now is we have the Ray Garcia early child or preschool training program that we do in January, where over 1,000 preschool educators come for a day of training. And there's all kinds of wonderful programs. And I've gone to it, both sitting there to learn myself as well as being there as a trustee for the department. And the classes are wonderful. So that's one of the things. But I'm really looking forward to looking at our programs, strengthening our programs, and looking to see where we can improve them and meet other needs that people have. And as you said, it's something that we could do is to go and to speak and to let the community know more about what we are. We're called a hidden jewel. I want everybody to see our bright, shiny lights and not to be hidden anymore.
Well, we're getting very close to the end of our time with you, and so what I'd like to offer you the opportunity to do is address our audience at home. If there's anything that you would like to leave them with about you as a candidate and why they should vote for you.
Okay. Well, hello everybody at home. I hope that you have learned a lot about what we do for Harris County Department of Education and realize what a valuable entity we are. I am uniquely qualified, much more qualified than my opponent, because of my experiences. The board has chosen me as their vice president. I stepped down in May and did not run, but I had been vice president previously. My fellow board members all around Region 4 had selected me as one of the 10 representatives of all of Region 4. I think there's 54 school districts. I was one of 10 selected for their Legislative Advisory Council. So you can see that my fellow trustees, both on Harris County Department of Education and my fellow trustees for the entire region, consider me to be somebody who should stay in office and somebody who needs to be here to be able to provide these wonderful services. Unfortunately, my opponent seems to feel like we shouldn't be here anymore, but that would cause you as taxpayers much more money because these services either wouldn't be provided or would have to be provided 100% by the school districts, which would probably cause a raise in your taxes from your school districts. So keep your taxes low, keep me in office, and remember to vote November 4th. Debbie Kerner, County School Trustee 5, and I'm on the Democratic side of the ballot. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, and for all of you people watching at home, stay tuned for the next candidate.